Dad's text hit harder than any argument we'd ever had. Your brother has 3 kids. You have money. Pay their $600 to $800 balance or stay home. I stared at it, then replied with one word. Understood. 5 minutes later, I logged into the cruise account and canceled one reservation. 20 minutes after Dad's ultimatum. My phone rang. Why did the cruise line cancel our suite? They didn't. I said, I did. He went silent. Dad thought he had only kicked me off a vacation. What he hadn't realized was that the suite, deposit, and reservation he planned to keep belonged to the daughter he just disinvited. Subscribe, comment where you're watching from and what time it is there before we continue. My name is Nora Bellamy. I was 42, divorced, childless. And apparently, that combination had convinced my family that my time and money were always more flexible than everyone else's. I worked as a director of procurement for a healthcare company in Atlanta. I earned a good salary. I also had a mortgage, retirement goals, and plans of my own. But whenever something needed organizing, the same sentence appeared. Can Nora handle it? Flights, hotels, restaurant reservations, family schedules. Eventually, can Nora handle it became Nora will handle it. That was how I ended up organizing my parents' 40th anniversary cruise. Dad, Frank, was 66 and retired from sales. Mom, Marilyn, was 64. They weren't broke. Their house was paid off. Dad had a pension and retirement savings. They simply weren't comfortable planning a large family trip online. So I found a 7-night Eastern Caribbean cruise leaving from Port Canaveral. My brother Colin, his wife Tara, and their 3 children would come too. Mason was 11, Chloe 7, and Eli 4. For Mom and Dad, I booked a 2-bedroom suite that I would share with them. I paid the roughly $2,400 deposit myself as part of their anniversary gift. Dad loved calling it our anniversary suite. I never corrected him. Why would I? I was going with them. Mom and Dad would cover their remaining fare before final payment, and I would pay mine. Simple. At least that was what I thought. The problem was that Dad had spent years looking at Colin and me through the same formula. Colin had 3 children. I had none. So Colin had real responsibilities. I had extra flexibility. If Colin needed help, Dad saw family obligation. If I had plans, Dad saw negotiable details. I had ignored that imbalance for years because it usually cost me time. Not thousands of dollars, this time. Dad wasn't asking me to make a reservation. He was about to decide what $600 to $800 of my money should be used for. The cruise was 112 days away when Colin called Dad with the problem. His annual sales bonus had come in lower than expected between the 2 connecting cabins for Colin, Tara, and their 3 kids. They still owed $6,800 before final payment. They technically had the money. But paying it meant pulling from their emergency savings or carrying part of the trip on credit cards. Tara didn't want either option. A cruise isn't an emergency, she told Colin. Her solution was simple. Cancel their cabins. Celebrate Mom and Dad another way. Dad hated that idea. This is our 40th anniversary, he said. I'm not celebrating 40 years with half my family missing, Colin told him. Then we may just have to sit this one out. Dad answered, No, I'll work something out. What he meant was me. There were 3 separate reservation numbers for the trip. My suite reservation included me, Mom, and Dad. Colin controlled the 2 cabins for his family. I had no authority over them, and I had never agreed to pay their final balance. That didn't stop Dad from calling me. Colin came up short on the cruise, he said. Then they may need to cancel. They can't cancel. Why not? Because this is our anniversary. I waited. Then he said, I need you to cover their balance. How much $6,800? I actually thought I had misheard him. You want me to spend $600-800 on Colin's vacation on family? No. Dad went quiet. Then his voice changed. You can afford it. That doesn't mean I owe it. He has 3 children, Nora, and a Caribbean cruise is not a family emergency. Dad called that selfish. I called it a budget. What bothered me most wasn't that Colin had come up short. Unexpected expenses happen. What bothered me was how quickly Dad had decided the solution lived inside my bank account. He never asked what I was saving for. He never asked whether I wanted to lend Colin the money. He didn't even ask if it was a loan. To Dad. The equation was already settled. Colin had 3 children. I had money. Therefore, I should pay. I thought saying no would end the conversation. Instead, Dad treated it like the opening bid. Mom called the next morning. She didn't sound angry. That almost made it worse. "Nora, couldn't you just front the money and let Colin pay you back?" "Did Colin say he'd repay me?" She paused. "No, but he would eventually." "So nobody actually asked me for a loan?" Mom sighed. "You know what I mean." I did. Dad wasn't asking me to lend $6,800. He expected me to absorb it, so I called Colin myself. "Did you ask Dad to get money from me?" "No," he said quickly. "I told him we might have to cancel. He said you could probably help, and you let him call me. I figured if you were okay with it, you never checked if I was okay with it." That shut him up. Then I learned Tara had already told him they should skip the cruise rather than touch their emergency savings. So even Colin's wife wasn't demanding this trip happen. Dad was. "I told Colin clearly I'm not paying your balance. I'm also not touching your reservations. You and Tara decide what you want to do." Later that afternoon, Dad called again. "You're really going to make your brother disappoint his kids over money you have sitting in the bank. My savings are not the family vacation fund. You don't have children. You don't understand what things cost." "I understand exactly what $600-800 costs." He called me selfish. I ended the call. An hour later, the text arrived. "Your brother has 3 kids. You have money. Pay their $6,800 balance or stay home." Then another, "If family means this little to you, don't come on the cruise." I stared at the screen. This wasn't about helping Colin anymore. Dad had just attached a $6,800 admission fee to my place in the family. So I typed one word. Understood. He thought I meant I was backing down. What I meant was something else entirely. If I was no longer part of the trip, I was no longer going to remain financially responsible for the reservation built around me. I opened the cruise account. 3 reservation numbers appeared. I left Colin's 2 exactly where they were. Then I clicked the only one that was mine. My reservation was the 2-bedroom suite. Guests Nora Bellamy, Frank Bellamy, Marilyn Bellamy. My account, my credit card. My deposit. I clicked cancel. I knew I could lose the roughly $2,400 I had already paid, and I accepted that. I wasn't making Dad pay for my boundary. I was paying for it myself. I didn't touch Colin's 2 cabins. I didn't cancel anyone's flights, excursions, or anything else. Just the reservation Dad had told me I was no longer welcome to use. His text had arrived at 6:12 p.m. At 6:32, my phone rang. "Nora, why did the cruise line cancel our suite?" "They didn't," I said. "I did." "What, you told me to stay home?" "I said stay home if you wouldn't help Colin." I understood. Dad's voice rose. "That was our anniversary suite. It was the suite I booked because I was traveling with you. Your mother and I were staying there, with me." He went quiet. Then I said, "You don't get to disinvite the person holding the reservation and keep the reservation." Dad immediately told me to call the cruise line and reinstate it. I said no. He accused me of ruining their anniversary. I reminded him the cruise wasn't sold out. He and Mom could book another cabin under their own names, with their own deposit, at the current price. Maybe it wouldn't be the same suite, but they could still go. "That suite was your gift to us," he said. The gift was taking the trip together. He didn't like that answer. Then he said, "Do you realize what Colin is going to think?" That confused me. "Why does Colin care about your suite?" Dad didn't answer. A few minutes after we hung up, Colin called. "What did you do to Mom and Dad's reservation I didn't explain?" I forwarded him Dad's text. There was silence on the line. Then Colin said, "Much quieter. He told you to stay home." Yes, I never told him to do that. "No," I said. "You just let him try to make me pay." And suddenly, the $6,800 wasn't the only problem anymore. Colin didn't argue with me, not immediately. He just said, "I thought Dad was asking you. I didn't know he was threatening to kick you off the trip." "That doesn't make it better, I know. Do you?" Another silence. Then he admitted the part that mattered. "I should have stopped him when he said he'd talk to you." "Yes, I didn't because I thought maybe you'd say yes." There it was. Not cruelty, convenience. A few hours later, Tara called me. She sounded mortified. I told Colin we should cancel if we couldn't afford it, she said. I never asked anyone to pay for us. I know, and Frank told you to stay home. I forwarded her the text too. She read it while we were on the phone. Then she said, "We're not taking $600 to $800 from you for a vacation. That should have settled everything." Instead, Dad called again the next morning. By then, Colin and Tara were seriously discussing canceling their cabins. Dad was furious. "You've ruined this entire trip. I canceled one reservation because you refused to help your brother." Colin and Tara decided they don't want to use emergency savings for a cruise. The kids have been talking about this for months. I'm sure they have, so you're okay disappointing them. That was the part Dad kept doing. Every adult decision somehow became my responsibility once children were involved. This was supposed to be about family, he said. Then, why did you put a $600 to $800 admission fee on my seat? I did not. I read his text back to him. He stopped arguing for a moment. Then, Mom joined the call. "Nora, can't we just fix this?" "What does fixing it mean?" She hesitated. "Put the suite back. Help Colin. Let everyone go. So fixing it means I pay." Neither of them answered. That silence told me more than any argument could. So I asked Dad the obvious question. "If it matters this much, why don't you pay Colin's $600 to $800? His answer came immediately. "I'm not taking that kind of money out of retirement for a vacation." I almost couldn't believe he had said it. "Then you understand why you don't get to take it out of my account either. That's different. How you can afford it. Affording something and owing it are two different things." Dad started to respond, but I kept going. "You don't want to use your retirement savings because this is optional. You're right. It is optional. So how did an optional vacation become my financial responsibility?" He had no answer. Mom finally said quietly, "We ask you because you're usually the one who can fix things. That doesn't make me responsible for them." Colin was on the call by then, too. "Dad, stop," he said. Frank snapped. "I'm trying to keep this family together," Colin answered, "by making Nora pay for us." That was the first time he had directly challenged him. Tara and Colin canceled their 2 cabins before final payment. The kids were disappointed, but nobody went into debt. Nobody lost their home. Nobody faced an emergency. Mom and Dad booked a regular balcony cabin under their own reservation. It cost more than it would have months earlier, and it wasn't the suite Dad had imagined. But they were still going. Then Dad asked me one last time, "So you're really not coming? You told me to stay home. I was angry. You were trying to decide what my money was for." He went quiet. "For years," I said. "You've treated the fact that I don't have children like it means my time and savings matter less. That's not fair." You literally wrote, "Your brother has 3 kids. You have money." Another silence. "I love Colin's kids," I said. "That doesn't make me responsible for financing their vacations." Months later, Mom and Dad sailed for their anniversary. Not in the suite, not with the entire family. And the strange part was, I hadn't taken the cruise away from anyone. Dad's ultimatum had simply forced everyone to start paying for their own choices. Mom and Dad still went on the cruise. They booked a regular balcony cabin and celebrated their 40th anniversary without the big family photo Dad had imagined. I didn't mock them. I sent Mom flowers before they left and wished them both a happy anniversary. Colin and Tara stayed home with the kids. A few weeks later, Colin called me. "I should have shut Dad down when he said he'd ask you." "Yes, I let him do it because I thought there was a chance you'd pay." That was the first apology from him that actually sounded honest. After that, things changed in small ways. If Colin needed help, he asked me directly. If Dad started saying, "Nora can probably cover," Mom would interrupt. "Ask her. Don't spend her money for her." Dad took longer. After the cruise, he finally called. "I shouldn't have told you not to come. That wasn't the whole problem." He knew what I meant. A few seconds later, he said, "I shouldn't have expected you to pay Colin either. I accepted that, but I didn't go back to being the automatic planner, banker, and problem solver." The next time the family planned a trip, everyone booked their own rooms and paid their own deposits. It was almost strangely simple. I used the vacation days I had saved for the cruise later that year on a trip I chose for myself. Nothing extravagant, No revenge vacation, just something I wanted to do. That was when I finally understood Dad's biggest mistake. He was right about one thing. I did have $6,800. He was wrong about what that meant. Knowing I could afford something never gave him the right to decide I owed it. For years, my family treated financial stability like an open invitation to spend my money for me. Dad thought having 3 children made Colin's needs more important than mine. But a vacation isn't an emergency, and being able to afford something doesn't make you responsible for buying it. I didn't cancel Colin's cabins. I didn't stop my parents from sailing. I simply removed myself and my money after Dad told me I wasn't welcome. He thought stay home applied to me, but not to everything I was paying for. He learned they came together. If your family demanded thousands for a sibling's vacation or told you to stay home, what would you do? Tell me below and subscribe for more family betrayal stories.